On April 10th, 1912, thousands of people gathered to Southampton to see the world's largest, fastest, most luxurious ocean liner ever built take its maiden voyage to New York, according to Dan Lynch from a Titanic Illustrated History. Those lucky enough to be aboard the Titanic that day were taken aback by its elegantly decorated interior as they were by its enormous exterior. During the 5 days the Titanic was at sea, the experience was a dream turned terribly wrong for all of its passengers. I will discuss the main features of the Titanic's accommodations and details of the first-class passengers before the sinking, the second and third-class passengers before the sinking, as well as the crash. Before the ship sank, life aboard the Titanic was the most luxurious available. The best accommodations that the luxury ocean liner Titanic had to offer was enjoyed by the first class. First-class passengers got to enjoy the Titanic's best interior feature, the grand staircase, which had carved oak paneled walls as well as an iron framed domed glass skylight overhead, according to Lynch. First class passengers also enjoyed an immaculately decorated dining room as well as 2 veranda cafes on the porch and a French coffee shop. Men were able to retire to the smoking room and women had a reading and writing room to themselves. First class passengers also had access to a gymnasium, swimming pool, and a Turkish bath on board, according to Lynch. The first-class suites were by far more luxurious than those on any other ship. The most lavish of these were the 4 parlor suites, which had their own sitting rooms, 2 bedrooms, 2 wardrobe rooms, and a private bath, according to Lynch. Bruce Ismay, president of the White Star Line, occupied one of these suites with his own 50-foot promenade, according to Lynch. The first class were able to keep themselves in glamorous dining cafes and lounges that were off limits to second and third class passengers. While the first class was aboard the most luxurious ocean liner in existence, it would not feel that way to the third class passengers especially. Second class citizens were accommodated with luxury comparable to first class aboard other ships. However, there was a stark contrast between the upper 2 classes and the third class accommodations. Although second-class diners had a separate handsomely decorated dining room which featured long tables and fixed swivel chairs, they were still served food from the same galley as first-class diners, just without as many lavish decorations and dinnerware, according to Lynch. Second-class passengers enjoyed a lounge decorated with finely upholstered mahogany chairs with sycamore paneled walls. Second-class smoking rooms were furnished to a man's desires, but no equivalent room was available for the women, said by Dan Lynch. Although the third-class cabins were in no way extravagant, accommodations in the third class were better than most of the passengers would have known it at home. These cabins were located in the lower, less desirable parts of the ship, according to Lynch. These passengers ate in a drab, white enamel paneled dining room decorated with white Star Line posters. They shared one general room with pine paneling and sturdy teak furniture, as well as a shared smoking room that lacked the clubroom atmosphere of the upper-class smoking rooms, according to Lynch. This perfect getaway was quickly transformed into one of the worst tragedies in American history. On its 5th day at sea, the Titanic's manufacturing was not sufficient to keep her afloat on the treacherous ocean waters. At 11:40 a.m., an iceberg was sighted by the lookout on duty, but less than a minute later, the Titanic collided with the iceberg, gouging a hole along the side of her bow, according to Lynch. Until recently, the thought was that the filling of the bow with water increased its weight, which caused the stern to rise 45 degrees in the air before snapping half under the weight of its pressure, which would have looked like this, according to Coping. Recent research shows structural weakness to the ship, particularly the expansion joints along the side of the ship, according to Coping, were located here and here. These joints were intended to allow the ship to shift slightly when going through big ocean waves, and it was these joints that caused the ship to snap in half so easily. It is now believed that after the bow began to flood, the stern was only 10 degrees above water when the ship split in two, according to Coping, which would have looked more like this. Not until 12:30 a.m. did word reach third class to begin bringing women and children up the lifeboats. By 1 a.m., only the 5th lifeboat had been lowered into the water, carrying over 40 people, according to Lynch. Sometime around 1:40 a.m., Captain Smith called through a megaphone to the lifeboats asking they come back for more passengers, but no one had responded, according to Lynch. By 2 a.m., many of the passengers waited for imminent death. At 2:20 a.m., water came crashing through the glass dome ceiling of the first-class stairway and along the finely carved oak-paneled walls. Moments later, the last of the ship was completely submerged, according to Lynch. The Titanic took the lives of 1,552 people that night, while only 705 escaped the disaster because of the lifeboats that awaited the Carpathia's rescue, which would arrive just after 4 a.m., according to the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic's ending was more historic than her departure. It was devastating loss to America as well as Europe. This is a devastating event that we could have prevented with proper planning and sturdier framework. The Titanic was the most comfortable and elegant way for one to travel the Atlantic, and all the passengers aboard the ship felt fortunate to be there. What began as a glamorous getaway for most turned abruptly wrong when thousands of lives and millions of dollars of people's prized possessions were lost at sea. It was the most lavish, extravagant, and disastrous 5 days of the century. The first and second class were treated with the top-of-the-line accommodations and were given a greater chance of survival as the ship sank. The third class was not a luxurious way to travel, though conditions were bearable. It was the third class who was thought of last when loading passengers onto the lifeboat. When the ship struck the iceberg, better planning should have been done by the ship's crew. The lifeboats were not filled to their capacity. Most of the passengers' lives were lost, according to the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic will always be remembered as the unsinkable ship that sank anyway. It is still heavily researched after 100 years because people are fascinated with the story. Thanks for listening.